All right, here we go. Welcome, everybody. This is BD Live. This is episode 3, and we are here today to talk all things saltwater bass here in our backyard of Southern California. I got a panel of the pros, the guys that are doing this day in, day out. They got the program dialed. They know the fishery well. So brought them, looped them into this, and before we jump into that, I want to give a quick shout out and thank you to our partners at Costa Sunglasses for putting this on and helping us bring you these seminars where, again, ton of knowledge, ton of information in this room. So really, really stoked and appreciate them for allowing us to put these on. Another cool thing too is what we're going to do. Everyone who registered for this event, your name was automatically entered into a drawing. And at the end of this, we'll pull a name, you get a free pair of shades, and we'll reach out to you. So again, thank you to Costa for that. And without further ado, I want to jump in and kind of do a roundtable introduction of all the guys, all the pros that we got here. And I'm going to kick us off with Mr. Eric Landesfien, longtime BD contributor, bass guy for sure, really knows the program. So Eric, if you want to just give us a quick introduction, kind of how you got into bass fishing, where you're at with it now, and just give us a high level kind of a little bit about your program and yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Eric Landesfien. I started fishing saltwater bass seriously when I got my first skiff in probably 2006, 2007. I thought I knew absolutely everything there was to about it from all my years of sport boat fishing. And after a quick, 3 or 4 trips, I realized I knew nothing. And I've spent the last 15, 14 years trying to figure it all out. And while I don't have a master by any stretch of the imagination, I think I've got a better handle on it than I did then. I've got some information to hopefully share with you guys.
Awesome. Thank you, Eric. And I'm going to do the same thing, jump over to Mr. Jimmy Decker, who is one of Eric's go-to fishing buddies. Jimmy, want to give us the same rundown?
Jimmy Decker here. I've pretty much been fishing my whole life. I have a 100-ton license. I ran boats at the port in San Diego when I was younger. And 90, I got out of that, and was over the. I don't have anything against sport boats, but I was just over the sport mentality of kill, and got my first real skiff and started a guide service and just started taking out 2 guys at a time bass fishing. It wasn't all about pulling on big fish. It was pulling on the right tackle, and that's calico bass fishing for me.
That's awesome. And
that's about it. It's my favorite thing to do.
I love it. Last but not least, Mr. Matt Moyer, who he's part of the Ballast Point fishing team. Matt, how are we doing?
Good. Thanks for having us. I'm Matt Moyer, Ballast Point fishing team captain. And I got into, I was actually into freshwater fishing before I was like die hard. And then my dad got me into saltwater, because we'd go out to Otay and catch maybe 1 or 2 largemouths, and then we'd go down to Mission Bay and catch 30 spotted bay bass. And from that time on, I was just sold. And then once I was introduced to calico bass, I just never looked back. It's my favorite fish to catch. I've learned a lot from these guys. Eric and Decker are legends. They're the old guys in the sport now that Jack Souls retired. So I'm a student. I'm a student just like everybody else, and always I'm actually looking forward to hearing what they have to say.
I have one thing to say that Decker's the old guy, and I'm the
old guy.
Yeah, I was going to say that feels like a little bit of payback for the goatee comment before we teamed up. So yeah, anyway, again, thank you guys so much for joining us. Same thing, man. I'm actually really geeked up to take some notes and learn from you all as well, because I know, again, you guys are doing this kind of day in, day out, and this is your program. So I got a bunch of talking points, some topics, stuff that I want to run through as well. Also, for everyone who's joining us here live, right under the video player, you'll see a little text box through YouTube. So if you got questions, throw them in there, and we'll try to get to them as best we can or circle back at the end. But anyway, I want to kind of kick off with again, we're talking saltwater bass. So maybe Eric, you can kick us off with just give us like a real rundown of, again, the different types of bass, where they're at here throughout the Southern California Bight, just kind of a real high level overview of what the bass fishery looks like here.
Yeah, so basically, we have 3 different species of bass, and some of them interact in different situations. Spotted bay bass, which are obviously in the bays and harbors. Anything enclosed by rocks or land, you can find spotted bay bass. Pretty basic. There's sand bass, calico bass, which also live in harbors, but also live outside in the breakwalls that surround those harbors, and they are spread throughout, basically from Point Conception down to Mag Bay, I think, and that's basically the 3 basic types of bass we fish. They all interact together at some points. They're all very different and distinct species to fish for at others. And, a lot of guys that have their own boat but fish with live bait and stuff will go bass fishing, and they might catch a sand bass or a calico bass or even a spotted bay bass, depending on where they're fishing. But what we do is we isolate and target individual species. And I think that's what really differentiates saltwater bass fishermen from the average angler. And there's a lot of techniques and specific stuff that goes along with being able to do that.
Perfect. Yeah, I think that's a really good rundown, kind of high level, and we'll definitely dive into some of those different ones and again, different techniques for the different species and all that. So, yeah, again, they're in a variety of, between our bays, along the coast, out to the offshore islands that we have here. What about a time of year? Is there a seasonality to it? Jimmy, I don't know if you want to take this one, but kind of I know they're pretty solid year round, but is there really a peak time of year for bass fishing in general? Does it vary by species? Give us a quick lowdown on that.
Right now, it's usually June, July, beginning of August is probably the prime time for fishing calico bass and sand bass. Spotted bay bass usually starts picking up from now, and you get those really good all the way into the full moon of August, September. Oh, good. I just got a text. Shit. Now I forgot what I was saying. What are we doing? What was the question again?
Time of year.
I can't even remember. Oh, time of year. Yeah. Now is the time of year where you'll hook a fish and you'll get a big cloud of fish following, where you can pick off, it's not uncommon to have 50, 100 fish days in these 3 months, June, July, August. But, some of our biggest fish and some of our best fishing, over San Clemente Island's been in, January, February. And that's on the surface. So that's not on sinking lures. That's, subsurface baits that are running, 1 to 1 foot, 3 feet under the surface. So, you can catch them all year long, but this time of year is usually the best time of the year.
I have to chime in here on what Jimmy's saying and qualify the fact that, well, we're not well-rounded bass fishermen. Unless we're fishing a tournament, if the fish aren't biting in the first 3 feet of the water column, we're not catching them. So we're
not catching them.
What we design our whole game plan around. But that's the funnest thing, and Mac can even agree with that. I mean, other than fishing a crankbait that might run at 10 or 12 feet, we're not really targeting bass on the bottom, although I'm going to show you guys later here when we talk about sand bass, an amazing lure that I came up with this year, and Jimmy did too. But Matt, you got anything to say about all that?
I'm right with you guys. I mean, as far as fishing, it seemed like early June we got out to San Clemente Island, the fish were spawning, but I don't fish anything. I'm fishing the weedless year round for calico bass. I don't have the patience to do slow and low, except this SBS tournament series. It seemed like every bottom series. Yeah, it seemed like I had
bottom bass series.
It seemed like I had an A rig tied on, and if I wasn't fishing the A rig, you weren't going to be in the in the top 10. So
Go ahead. Jordan, I hate to get away from your topic list that you sent us. It was very great and everything. But I think what we should do is go from the most basic bass fishing techniques to the more advanced ones as far as strategy and things like that. I tend to take these things around. I apologize.
No, by all means, it's better coming from you than me, because I'm just the kook up here kind of hosting the thing.
I'm not much better. So
a live anchovy on a number 4 hook and 12-pound test. Best way to get started.
In your bit.
Jordan asked me to bring some lures that I could show here, and let's talk about that saltwater bass series that we all fish. It's very early in the year, and sand bass normally score well. So we're looking for a lure that can catch sand bass, and everybody that goes out fishing at some point fishes for sand bass. Get away from, come on, Jimmy, give me a break. Anybody that fishes bass eventually fishes for sand bass, be it if it's for fun, you got your kids out, you got your dad out, you got, you're fishing a tournament, you want to do something like that. There's other, if you want to fish a hookup bait or something like that, that's great, live it up. But, I'm not that guy, and I'd rather fish a more aggressive presentation of a bait. And I've always fished the 8-inch MC slug on a lead head. But one of the problems we have with sand bass and also rockfishes in the rockfish seminar is that they tend to eat it head first, and when you set the hook, you pull the bait backwards out of its mouth. So Jimmy and I on the same exact day came up with the same theory where we cut the hook off a lead head, and I'm going to unscrew this here. It's top secret. I'm not fishing any more bottom tournaments, so I'm going to share it here. This is you keep part of the hook shank under, and you solder a spring into the back of the lead head. Now you could slide a slug on there or a swim bait. I'm sure somebody's going to sell this eventually. And
I'm going to sell these. These are the ones I made.
And no matter what direction that fish eats that bait, it's getting hooked. And the funny part about this story is Jimmy and I came up with this on the same day. And he's like, I got a great idea to show you. I'm like, I have a great idea to show you. And we showed each other the exact same bait. And we went from having a maybe 30 or 40% hookup rate on these sand bass to damn near 100%. So if you guys are doing anything and you want to take around, this is the bait to come up with. And I might actually be doing an article for BD Outdoors about it.
We can start with that.
But
yeah,
that's actually pretty cool. I was putting a treble hook at the front.
Yeah, well, this works better. Jimmy actually made his out of a torpedo sinker.
I made mine out of 6-ounce torpedo sinkers. I just cut them in half, and then I drilled a little hole, and then I JB welded in one of Corey's big springs, and then I just powder coated them. And then you put those owner assist hooks.
But no matter where you're fishing,
it's amazing.
No matter where you're fishing sand bass, I mean, anywhere along the coast, any time of year, they will eat a giant bait like this if you just drop it in free spool and burn it off the bottom as fast as you can, 5 or 10 turns, and throw it back in free spool. They're the dumbest bass there are. They're the easiest to catch, but they take the most captaining catch them because you pretty much have to drop it right on their heads. And what it comes down, I'm sorry to monopolize here. I'm going to let everybody else talk in a minute, but what it comes down to with bass fishing from a skiff, 90% of it, be it spotted bay bass, sand bass, or calico bass, is putting your boat in the exact position that you need to have it in to present your lure properly. And a lot of these casts are 20 feet to get those bites. And the biggest struggle that guys have, as far as I'm concerned, is they don't understand how to relate to those fish with their boat. And Matt or Jimmy, please chime in here. But I mean,
well, you see it all the times. The guys that pull right into the dead center of the kelp bed, lift up the motor, and start casting. They think they're fishing calico bass because they're in the kelp, but they're nowhere near where the bass are going to be biting in that particular area. So I'm sure we're going to go into it, but reading water and understanding the current and how fish stage up on certain pieces of structure or kelp is a huge thing. And it's time on the water. It's reading Eric's columns. It's paying attention when, how's that, buddy?
Thanks, buddy. Great plug.
It's paying attention, even if you're on a sport boat and you have your own skiff, it's paying attention how that operator, that sport boat sets up on the spot, and it's simple little things that if you just pay attention and make a mental note of, hey, this guy's set up, the current's going downhill, he's set up on this end of the kelp where all of our baits are going back into it, and we got bit right here. Well, you can emulate that all the way down the beach, and find those exact same kind of setups and catch fish off of all those spots till eventually it stops working and you have to figure it out again,
Yeah.
But the fish are going to tell you, I mean, Eric and I, or me, Eric and Matt, I mean, pulling to a spot, everybody makes 5, maybe 8 or 10 casts. If there's not a fish coming behind the bait or someone sees a fish, throwing the motors up and we're gone. We don't sit there because the spot looks nice and go, ooh, this looks tasty. I'm going to sit here for 3 hours and see if I can dredge one out. No, it's like bang, 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 bang. flat
Yeah, and so you guys
cast, move the boat. You got to find biting fish to catch fish.
Like
Makes
what they were what they were saying. I got a new Garmin touchscreen 8610 XVS, and it was a game changer for me as far as structure goes. And when I pull up on a spot, we don't even do lines in the water. We want to see where the drift is going first, and that's why we have the snail trail. We kind of see where it takes us, because I usually like to sit up, wherever above the structure, so that we can get a few casts in on that structure, because they're not always sitting right on the structure. And I learned that about Isers this last year, where we got on a good bite off of the structure, not right on top of it. So, yeah, like what they were saying, setting up and being able to get your bait in the right spot is detrimental.
sure. So
Matt, it's funny you say that. That's something I realized this year or a couple of years ago that really rings a chord here. Sand bass are designed to hide in the sand, not designed to hide next to a rock. So when they land at the bottom, they're invisible in the sand. So they're not going to be over the rock. They're going to be in the sand on the upcurrent edge of that rock, waiting for something to come towards that rock so they can shoot up and eat it. I mean, that's pretty much the bait. So, one of the things you brought up, Jordan, was the baits we use. I actually grabbed some, and I think that all three of us are probably on the same page with this.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to do away with the thought that the bait is what makes the bass fisherman here, because it's really not the case. So I showed you the slug. This could be a hookup bait. This could be a split and swim bait. This could be whatever. This is going to catch you sand bass or calicos that are suspended over deep water structure, or big reds or whatever. You don't need anything. I use this bait for everything. If I'm going to drop down, this is the only bait I drop down. This is a weedless swim bait. This color is called the hot cotch. It's green on top instead of gold belly. There's a lot of different colors, and they all work. But I have thrown nothing but this for 5 years, 6 years now, and we've never not caught bass when someone else was catching.
So that's one of the questions that's rolled in here, right? Is your guys' favorite colors, and it looks like you like the greens, the green and golds. That's your.
You notice that the slug and the hot cod swim bait are the exact same color.
Yep. I
also have 5-inch swim baits that are this color. We fish for spotties. It doesn't matter if you have a bait fish color. All bass eat bait fish. They will bite it. There's never a situation where you're like, oh, I got a thing with 8 red legs and a green back. That's all they want.
You guys are gonna laugh.
Moyer.
Hey,
Tracy says hi, Matt.
Hi, Tracy. I'm colorblind, so I'm red, green, and blue, purple deficiency, and I don't really believe in color. I believe in presentation. And and like the funny thing is a lot of people I fish with, they're like, why are you fishing that color? And like I think it's something else, but I mean, as far as like, you go to San Clemente, Stimbridge from Pearl Swim Baits started pouring a Winchy. He's got a P-bot that I like to throw. You go to Catalina, you're throwing more like smelt colors, blues, light. I don't know. I throw what, like, it doesn't matter to me what color what really happens. In La Jolla and in the local waters, I pour a reburn that I call Goldie Hawn, and it's just basically I just put a ton of gold dust into it, and it's just the ugliest thing you've ever seen, but it gets bit. So I'm not a big believer in color, really.
So let's back up a second here. The reason we fish this color, we used to fish a brown color that Corey poured, MC Swim Baits poured, but we couldn't see it in the water. And that's one of the things you need to see the bait and watch the fish eat it so you can set up on it properly. We can talk about that in a minute. Well, we couldn't see that bait when it was overcast. So we just did a white paint marker and paint the top in white so we could see it in the water. And we finally said, Corey, can you pour something we could actually see on an overcast day? And he poured this bait. And we're like, that's a dumbass looking bait. I'm never going to catch anything on that. And we fished nothing but that since.
Yep.
So it's just.
That's funny though, Eric. My favorite jig is a banana jig.
Sorry, what's that?
My favorite jig's a banana jig for calicos.
Me too.
Yeah.
A lot of big yellows and bass in that.
And so you're, again, it's kind of,
That's pretty much all I throw on surface iron.
Getting back to the baits real quick. Here's a jerk shad.
It's how the bait swims.
This is not a gulp jerk shad. This is an
I'm
MC.
listening to you, Eric.
A jerk shad, anywhere you cast shallow any time of year, spotted bay bass, calico bass, sand bass, whatever, they will all eat this. Jimmy, you want to talk about the presentation used for this bait?
Well, I was just going to say, when you color, color doesn't really matter as long as the bait's performing properly. You know, the fish are going to react to something that's moving and is swimming in the right way. You know, you can pour a hot catch, but you know, if you rig it with the tail in front and the head in the back, they're not going to bite it. You know, the really dumb ones might, but it's the presentation and how the bait swims. It's just having confidence in what you have tied on. You
And
know,
how is it retrieved, Jimmy?
yeah, that's what I was going to ask.
On the jerk shad retrieve is all. Everybody thinks anything that says jerk, you know, like the DD100, the shad, everything that we fish, it's all cadence with the reel handle. You know, pop, 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 dot, 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 dot. Nothing, never, except with the weedless, am I turning the handle at a consistent speed. The weedless, I like to turn to consistent speed fast. It's how that thing moving. Everything else, my crankbait, burn it down. Everything's on a. Once you figure out the cadence to your bait, you've got 90% of it figured out of how they want to eat it. And the fish are going to let you know if they want it fast or slow. You know, you throw out your DD100, you wind it down, pop, pop, pop. You know, hey Decker, you want a cocktail? I turn around, hop, bam, you get your rod ripped out of your hand. You go, okay, I need to make a little longer pause on these because this little 1 second isn't it. You know, it's like I tell my clients, you know, what were you doing when you got bit? Oh, I don't know.
Nothing.
Like, okay, well, you need to remember what you were doing when you got bit so you can do it again.
Sure.
You know, a lot of times it's wind it down, kill it for a minute.
And does that vary by
first crank the handle, man?
Does that vary by that cadence in that presentation? Does that vary by your spots, your condition, what you're targeting?
Day to day.
It depends.
Sometimes it's hour to hour.
So, you know, he's talking about these hard baits and crankbaits. This is a crankbait that we use all the time. This is a Berkeley Dredger 17.5. They make it this runs about 17 feet. They make them up to 20 feet. We'll catch fish on these baits in the middle of winter in 80 feet of water that runs 17 feet deep. Jimmy's got one right there. There's a lot of misconceptions about crankbaits and how to fish them. And basically what it comes down to is you need to have...
How do you get it all the way down to the bottom?
What's that? Jimmy's all hurt.
How do you get it all the way down to the bottom?
Yeah.
You guys are in 80 feet.
Yeah. We had someone ask us whether you guys are in 80 feet of water, how are you fishing a crankbait? Well, the fish are in the top 30 feet of the water column. They see it and they swim up and bite it. So be it a crankbait or he talked about the DD100. This is a Lucky Craft hard bait, and none of us are associated with it, so we pay full retail, but it's longer than a crankbait, narrower body. I fished this on 15-pound fluorocarbon line with a 200 size reel and burn it, and it bites it on a very long pause. It floats up backwards. And, you know, sometimes this is the only, if you're going to get one hard bait to fish calico bass with anywhere in Southern California, a DD100 would be it. But you're not going to be able to throw this bait on a heavy bass rod. It weighs nothing. I'm using a very, like what you consider a medium action 7.6 bass rod with a 200 size reel full of 15-pound fluorocarbon line. You can throw on light spectre, like 30-pound spectre, but the fluorocarbon fish is a little bit better. But what this bait represents is a bait fish, and it very accurately does that. And the same with the crankbait, a little bit deeper. But what these baits do is they look like scared bait fish. Now, you see bait fish when we're fishing all the time. I'm going to let somebody else talk in a minute. But, you go to the Kelp, or you go along a shoreline along Catalina or San Clemente Island, or even Newport or Palos Verdes, and you see bait that's doing this, and that's happy bait. That means the landlord's not home. They're just fucking watching TV, drinking Coors Lights, having a good old fucking time. You see bait that's doing this stuff, that means they're in big trouble. They're like, fuck, get me out of here, So you want to
for my trailer.
look like something's after it and freaked out. because bass don't know that there's nothing chasing that bait. Bass are very simple machines. They see predation happening. They say, oh, I better predate really quick or I'm not going to get a meal. So you get this lure, you wind it super fast and it pauses and it shoots off the other way. And even a non-hungry bass will see that and go after it.
React to it.
Yeah. And that's what works with crankbaits, hard baits. Either you get a real big bait like this Yozuri hard bait here. Guys that do this, like Jimmy said, they don't catch a lot. Guys that do.
So yeah, in general, you guys, in general, basically what you're doing is you're saying, all right, hey, we got this game plan. We're going to hit these spots. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to throw the go-tos and you're going to work, maybe a little bit different cadence, but in general, it's burn it in, it's get that reaction bite, it's to get those fish fired up and just trigger that general predatory, I see this, I got to kill it, I got to eat it type deal.
Absolutely. It's the same thing even with this thing for sand bass where we're burning it off the bottom and throwing it in freeze bowl. It's like shooting up and going straight down with a 3-ounce head on it. Very angular, and those fish just react to that. So wherever we go, we're trying to draw a reaction strike.
Yeah.
The dirt chat shooting around all crazy like a bait fish is freaking out.
And I got a couple questions rolling in here. Some guys talking about like stick baits, various stick baits, more like kind of like your traditional, like the nomad ones that are hot for more the offshore thing. I'm very familiar with those, as well as surface irons. I mean, I know I've got bit on them, but I think that's kind of a more of a bycatch, not a target deal. Where do you guys stand on those things versus kind of the crankbaits? Where do those play into the general?
I find that you throw surface iron, if they're eating the iron, you're catching bigger fish. Very rarely do I catch smaller fish on the surface iron. I started out as like a Tatty Salas guy, and then I met Jerry, so I started fishing the JRIs. So he's one of my sponsors, but one of the best swimming jigs. Spicer and Hugh Gron, they're part of Kicker. Kicker makes a really good jig as well. But exactly what Decker was saying earlier, it comes down to, does it swim or not? If it's rolling, if it's not kicking, you're not going to get bit on it. I mean, I've bought brand new irons, and I've thrown them once, and I just throw them in the trash.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's funny because too, right? Again, a lot of my familiarity is more the offshore program, but it is at the end of the day, right? A fish is a fish is a fish.
Yeah.
And that's always the case, right? Is a fired up presentation is always going to get bit before kind of the lethargic, just, slowly crank it in. It's getting that reaction, getting that attention. So again, whether it's like, just that right color,
and like for me, like my go-to stick bait right now is the SP Minnow made by Daiwa. I throw the one in bunker color, and it's kind of my search bait. A lot of times, like if I'm out at the islands or if I'm somewhere, I'll throw that, or I'll throw like the mint wax wing. For some reason, the reaction of those two baits seems to bring the fish up, and I'll get in the area. I'm like, okay, there's current here. Let me see if there's some fish. I'll give it like 10 minutes. If I don't see any followers, if I don't see any fish show themselves, I'm out. So
those wider swinging lures like a wax swing or a surface iron seem to have a lot more drawing power and will pull fish in from greater distances than a tight ring thing would. And I think Jimmy is going to tell us all about it.
What about what?
The drawing power of the bigger baits.
Oh yeah. I mean, I like to fish big bait. I mean, I was really hooked on the SP Minnow for years. Now I've gone to something, a lot longer. This is actually a Lucky Craft Sea Finger. It's like, I don't know, long, cast really well. I've been buying these ones off of eBay or Amazon. There's some kind of pike walleye lures. I was looking for them right now, but I, for some reason, can't find them. But then I go all the way up to like this thing,
Wow.
That's a pretty big bait for calico bass fishing. That's just Seville. Eric and I, the fish ever seen came up on this bait, and Eric hooked it, and unfortunately, somehow he lost it. But
Jimmy broke up there.
It was probably the biggest calico bass that
Jimmy broke up there for a second.
You hooked the biggest calico bass we've ever seen.
It was the biggest calico
that we've caught.
Clemente, and it just I watched it eat the bait, and Jimmy saw the boil after result. Is that like a 25-pound yellow? I'm like, no, that is a giant calico bass that came off somehow, even though all those giant treble hooks. I was sick to my stomach.
And I'd imagine in general, right? Bigger bait, bigger fish. Again, the surface side, that's kind of a bigger thing. Just general. Again, if you want to target only trophies, go with the bigger baits.
Well, I've taken Eric into some spots on the front side west end of Cat, and he's throwing that little DD 100 in some pretty nasty areas on 15-pound. I've seen him catch some quality, 6+ pound bass on that little teeny bait. So, the old saying, elephant eats peanuts, it still goes true with calico bass. You're definitely gonna, if you want to catch number, fish smaller. If you want to catch bigger, you want to fish bigger. You're going to catch less fish and get less bites with a big bait, but you're going to catch more quality fish. If you're out with your kids or you're just out to have a good time, then you're going to want to downsize to, a little DD 100 or a small, 4 or 5 inch weedless bait, something like that.
Got it. Why don't you guys, let's shift gears kind of so run us through again, all these baits, all the crank baits, swim baits, whatnot. What are your go-to, rod and reel setups? Run us through kind of what your quiver looks like when you're going out on a bass fishing trip. What are your go-to setups? How many you're taking with you? What do you got tied on? Just kind of high level, if you guys kind of want to go through each of yours.
You want me to go first?
Sure.
Okay. I took my earbuds out, so hopefully it's a little bit better. I usually take 3, sometimes 4 rods. I always have at least one crankbait rod. I fish all pen, fathoms, 200, 300s, and a 400. I always have at least, now one 9-foot crankbait rod with 30-pound braid to 25-pound fluorocarbon leader. I have one DD 100 rod, which is the same reel with a lighter leader. I go 15 or 20 pound on that. And then I have right now I'm fishing this 10-foot or 9.5-foot weedless rod with a 300 with 50 to 50-pound braid, 60-pound. And everything I'm fishing right now, except for a couple of my, goof off rods, are all rain shadow that Eric's wrapped for me. So I'm three rods can pretty much get it done. 4, if you want to, count my service iron stick, which I usually always have. I usually always have it. I don't always break it out. I'm good for Eric's like, oh, you're pretty adventurous here. I'll make 3 or 4 casts, and okay, put that thing away. Yeah. When you're throwing that little 8-footer with your DD 100 and your 200 size reel, and then you break out your service iron rod, you're like, oh, geez, this isn't worth it.
Yeah, 1 or 2 and call it a day.
Yep, one and done.
How about you, Matt? What's your go-to setups when you're running out?
I usually take too many rods and reels as my setup. So, no, I usually depends on where I'm going, but if I'm going to let's say San Clemente or even local La Jolla, usually I have 2. I use the Komodo 365s by Akuma on PCH rods. I spool all of my stuff up with 65-pound braid. I throw straight braid. I very rarely put a top shot fluoro leader on. If I do, it's usually on the crankbait. I'm usually fishing 40. I always bring the Komodo 400 with the power handle, 9-foot stick for iron. I always have a SP minnow. A lot of times I've been throwing that new Yozuri long cast. That's really nice. But I mean, I'm pretty much like a 9-inch weedless, and then maybe like a 6.5. I throw a lot of the big poncho weedless baits, and I also throw the IP weedless bait. I'll throw this the pearl swim bait. So basically, like probably four setups. I end up fishing one all day.
That sounds about right. How about you, Eric? And I know you wrap a lot of your own rods, so maybe as you're going.
I think I actually wrap more for Jimmy than I wrap for myself, but yeah, I recently got into rod building, and so regardless if I'm fishing the coast or I'm fishing Catalina or Clemente, my favorite rod to have in my hand is my DD100 rod, which is that small white bait I showed you guys earlier. Simply because I have a tiny reel, I have a rod that weighs nothing, fluorocarbon line, I cast a mile, hook something cool, and I've gotten bass probably close to 7 or 8 pounds on it at a surprisingly difficult areas. And I use a Revo ALX, which is a strictly freshwater reel, and an expensive one at that, but I destroy these things. I've gone through about 6 or 7 of them in the last 3 years. Luckily, we're sponsored, so it's not a big deal. But yeah, it's like, wow. But my second rod would always be my crankbait rod. And like Jimmy, I've gone to longer range shadow revelation. So basically, the freshwater bass tournaments, Bassmaster eliminated rod length requirements. So they made these rod blanks that are up to 10 feet long to the telescopic collapse with like the old flipping sticks in the old days. So we're fishing 9 to 10 foot crankbait rods now. And the added cast you're getting, if you're fishing 80 feet of water, getting an extra 20 feet on your cast is huge because once you wind your bait down, you're losing a third of your distance, actual retrieving distance at depth. But a crankbait rod and a weedless rod. Jimmy fishes a 9 foot weedless rod. It's a graphite glass rod. I fish a 7 footer because while he's bombing casts out, I am underhand and lobbing casts out. It's just 2 different styles of fishing.
Sure. And
they both work equally. He's more long casting. I'm more precise with my cast, and it's those 3 rods pretty much make up 90% of what I do. I'll bring another rod, like I throw a wax wing or a bigger hard bait on. I'll bring a surface iron rod, but I'm not going to throw a 9 footer most of the time. I'm throwing an 8 foot graphite composite rod. There's a lot of days where Jimmy's out throwing that big long. I know he wants to get to yellowtail Clemente, so he's fishing iron for bass all day. And he's just getting his ass whooped throwing that thing. I'm throwing the 8 footer like no problem.
No problem.
It's fine. Yeah. So
and how's
it's that stupid sport boat mentality that I still cannot shake to this day, that I want to have at least an 8, 9, or 10 foot rod in my hand.
So I want to share some with all these guys who grew up on sport boats and who learned their stuff on sport boats. One of the beautiful things about having your own boat is if you can't cast to what you want to cast to, you can move the boat over there and underhand
move the boat.
And yellowtail, bass, tuna, whatever. A lot of our bites come 10 or 15 feet from the boat. They don't give a shit. They're not paying attention to us.
So Jimmy's just getting nostalgic with the 10 footers out there.
Yeah, exactly. There's a few spots that we fish, like the Shoulder Breaker Beach, and a few spots that Eric and I fish over Clemente. We're like, you need a 9 foot rod.
You're
going to throw your arm out of socket trying to get to your baits where they need to be on certain areas.
Sure. Jimmy and I had a fantastic day of fishing on the backside of Clemente in a spot you could not get close to. Now, we were talking about before the start. You get the boat in there, and the south spool will come in and you have to race out as the wave's breaking going by you. So we actually built 9 and 10 foot rods just for that spot because we cannot reach it on the rods for fishing. And, you catch a lot of big bass. They don't always bite. I mean, they certainly didn't bite Saturday when we were in a tournament. But it's like, I can see this rod here, but, you hook a big bass on that 10 foot blue rod that I built for Jimmy, and
it's a challenge.
Yep. And what do you guys, let's talk about drag settings for a while on all your setups. Like, how do you have that? Do you have it buttoned down? Do you have it loose? Am I hitting faux pas here?
Jimmy's telling you right now, I guarantee it.
Okay.
Let's go.
Drag settings. Okay. So here's the one thing I always have to say when we're fishing anywhere where there's big sea bass cruising around. Eric, back your drag off, please. I've never picked up. I mean, Eric and I change gear occasionally, but I'm more the guy that grabs his stuff more than he grabs mine because I'll cluster stick myself out or something. I'll grab Eric's rod. I'll make a cast. My first instinct when I cast any rod for the first time is to cast it. As soon as it hits the water, check the drag. I cast out any one of Eric's rods. I don't care if it's his DD100 rod or his 100-pound braid tuna rod. As soon as that thing hits the water, I go to pull drag out. Either I'm getting a line cut in my finger because the drag's so smashed down, or it's just like, I can't pull an inch of line off it. So I'm going to say Eric likes his drags rather on the tight side. I prefer to fish mine more IGFA at 10 pounds of drag for a 30-pound test,
At a reasonable rate. How about you, Moyer? Where do you land on this? You got straight braid, so I'd be interested.
They're buttoned down. They're buttoned down as tight as they can go. All of them.
Yeah.
So here's a question that rolled into the chat here is on your guys' crankbaits. Are you guys sticking with the OEM factory hooks on those? You swapping out hooks? Just run us through kind of your go-to hook wise what you're using.
For me, I switch everything out to 2 or 3X, the same size owner, usually 3X or usually 2X on the inshore stuff owners, and then I upgrade to the 60-pound split rings, number 6s, I think they are. You can't leave those factory hooks.
Factory stuff until it wears out. Berkeley makes good stuff. A lot of the baits don't have hooks that'll hold up. So
the Berkeley crankbaits have excellent hooks and split rings on them, and you can get by fishing those for, quite a few trips. But a lot of the crankbaits, I like the evergreens too, and they're notoriously thin hooks. And I won't even fish them one time. I'll swap them out before they even hit the water. Because the one time you don't switch them out is going to be sea bass notoriously will hit crankbaits on the beach. The one time you don't switch those hooks out, you're going to hook a 50-pounder on your crankbait rod and you're going to straighten the hooks out.
I had a green whitey in my crankbait at the pipe the other day. I'm luckily I didn't hook it. But hey, one of the things I wanted to talk about earlier, and I'm sorry to get off topic again here, is we talked about that it's the boat positioning for all these things, and I think that's something that's really that's information that people could really use is how to approach, be it spotted bay bass, calico bass, sand bass, spot. And Matt or Jimmy, you guys want to chime in? I'm going to go use the restroom, so go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, great.
Yeah. What was he? I changed my hooks out just like Jimmy.
Okay. What do you?
I use owners. 100% owner hooks. I've caught all my best fish on them. I use the owner beast hooks. The trebles on my crankbaits. You have to be careful changing out your trebles and make sure that they're the same size because those crankbaits are tuned. And you get too big of a hook and they're just not going to swim right. I'll buy a lot of stuff over from Japan and their stuff is tuned so well and they usually come with higher grade hooks. I never change those out. Depending on what I'm buying. Like for spotted bay bass, I really like the zip baits. They're hard to find, they're like $20 each and people don't like to lose them, but you got to make sure that the bait's tuned correctly because once again, if it's not swimming correctly, you're not going to catch a fish.
So basically general rule of thumb, right, is you guys want to swap out for something stronger, but same size, comparable.
Yeah, correct.
It's the swim of that bait.
So here's a CR16. This is one of the crankbaits that got me hooked on crankbait fishing. This one's a little different. I got a 3 in the front and a 2 in the back. Bigger hook in front, slightly smaller in back. The one thing you got to be careful of if you go bigger is the spacing on where the hooks are is your hooks will hook together. And then you'll be handcuffed right here, okay? I put a 3 on the front and a 2 on this. It gets it down just a little bit deeper. It doesn't really affect how it swims, But when you swap your hooks out, I mean, it's so basic, but some guys might not know it. You want the 2 hooks on the front hook to lay in the belly. So you have 1 hook down, 2 against the bait, okay? That's how it swims when it's running. And on the back hook, you want the top hook pointing up. Exactly the opposite of the belly hook. You want the back hook pointing up. Yep. We're not talking about boat positioning. We got into hooks. So
okay, good.
So that's the way you want to rig them. I mean, some guys just take these off and they put a hook on. They put the split ring on. But if you have your hook on the body pointing up, it's not going to swim right, and you're going to be snagging a lot more. So,
and that right there is why Jimmy always kicks my ass fishing a crankbait, I guess, because I don't do that. So
he's like, "What do you mean they go on a certain way?" I'm like, "Yeah, you go on the belly like this." And he just happened to get lucky because he had them all rigged right that one day.
I know you guys have fished together how many days, and it took this webinar.
Yeah, I don't know.
Out.
Yeah,
I
we just found that out like
I
2
think we were a
weeks
couple
ago.
years ago, or 7 or 8 years ago. But yeah.
But okay, so yeah, let's switch gears though. Let's talk about boat positioning, and let's approach it from kind of that skiff standpoint, right? Like if you're getting out, and again, I'm sure it's going to be pretty wide variance based on where you're fishing, the conditions, but just give us kind of the lowdown on when you're coming up to a spot. What are the water conditions that you're looking for? What are you guys looking at before you even set up? And then how do you set up on each individual spots? Just kind of give us a couple of.
Perfect. Yeah. I think I'm going to talk about sand bass. Moyer, you could probably talk about kelp bed, calicos really well. I think Decker's the king of shallow water. So starting with sand bass, if you guys don't have a side imaging unit on your boat, which shows you what the bottom looks like away from your boat, buy a new fish finder. They're like $500 now, and it will completely change your understanding of how structure lays out. Matt was talking about earlier about how these sand bass are not on these spots and things like that. These rocks, be it a rock, a reef, a ridge, shale bottom, whatever. These spots just tend to aggregate bait fish because they can hide amongst it. The fish will put themselves in a position where they can be in a place that most likely have those fish, the bait fish encounter them and they can eat them. So, it's one thing to drive over a spot. You're like, oh, the bottom's just went up and I marked some stuff on it. The stuff you're marking is bait. You don't care about that. You look at the side imaging. Okay, so I can see now here there's this rock off the side of the boat and I see suspended bait fish. It's on this side. So that means the current's probably going this way and these fish are going to be waiting for this bait to come down to the spot. So you can actually pull up on these spots without ever running them over. And these fish have no idea you're there. And you can make a long cast. Once you get used to it, I mean, you can even find like something that you have a reference point for, a break wall or something. You can look, okay, I'm about this far away. I can see it on this thing now. I understand the distance involved. And you can pull up on these spots and you can throw a bait in the water, have it sink 10 feet and get a big sand bass in a spot that if you drove over it and you dropped your lure straight down where you saw the mark, if you got a bite, it's on the bottom or there's no bite to be had at all. So use that side imaging to understand what the spot looks like. Now it's no longer a 2D picture. You have a 3D image of it. Understand that now there's a whole thing around there and look for signs of bait around that because that's where those fish are going to be. And that's really simple to say, but takes a long time to figure out. It took me years. I had one of the first side imaging units in Southern California. The only reference point I was like, I was in Lake Tahoe and I could see a sunken boat, was the guy told me. I'm like, okay, great. How does that relate to what I'm going to do? That was, 2008. A lot's been done since then. There's a lot of information out there. You can go online, go on YouTube, whatever, but figure that out. And you'll find out everything you need to know about how to relate to these structure spots.
Got it. And Matt, why don't you give us, to Eric's point, why don't you give us the rundown on kind of setting up on kelps and kelp beds and how you're doing that? And also one of the questions that did roll through was, which I think you were probably perfect to answer this, is some tips for La Jolla. So maybe using kind of that general zone as far as like, how are you fishing it? How are you setting up on it? How are you setting up on the kelp beds?
Yeah. So, it's interesting because especially the kelp is always doing something different. And then with this El Nino years and the warm water, the kelp tends to die off. So you even having your meter on in the kelp, it's good to know because you'll see submerged kelp, that's under the water. Like what Decker was talking about earlier is like these guys that roll into the kelp and they just park in there and they start, potholing, or to me, that's kind of dead water. I'm looking for current. I'm looking at water clarity. Sometimes water clarity could throw you a loop. Like I fished Catalina one time, and it was in Salta Verde, and the fish were in this like milky white water, and they're biting really good in there. But for the most part, I'm looking for a little bit cleaner water. I'm looking for the kelp, whether it's laying down. For me, like is in La Jolla, seems like, I mean, I kayak fished there for 12 years before I bought a boat, and the calico and the yellowtail, even the white sea bass, it just seems like when there's a downhill current in La Jolla, or if there's a like an onshore breeze or something like that, that's when it bites the best. For some reason in La Jolla, when I see it up going up current, I don't stay long. I'll usually run down to Point Loma, but you got to have current with these fish. Like Eric was saying too, with like the base, like with the bait, I'm looking for like bait that's excited, that's running, that's you're looking for speed bait. I'm also listening in the kelp, because a lot of times, like those calicos, especially in the morning, they wake up, you start hearing splashes and things like that, and it can kind of tell you where the fish are. Especially, even you got to pay attention to the turns. I'll see turns that are sitting on the edge of a kelp line, and I'll just work that kelp line. Those birds are there because they're feeding on bait. And so just because they're not diving or they're not moving doesn't mean that they're not eating. They'll sit there and rest, and I'll work that. And I've gotten some really good bites on in Point Loma and La Jolla, where there's like terns or seagulls or something just sitting on the edge of a line. But if you're not getting current, if you don't see that kelp laying down, and most likely you're not going to get in a good bite.
Yep. So you want
to explain how you would approach a kelp bed that's got like downhill current or an edge or something like that?
Yeah. So I always approach it from the outside. I see people run right through it. I feel like the fish that I'm targeting is probably sitting in 30 or less feet of water. So I'll see an area that I'll see some kelp. So I'll kind of take a long turn around it, and I want to get up above it, because a lot of times, like, I don't always get on the TM, the trolling motor. A lot of times I like to drift back over those spots and those edges, and I try to set myself up so that I don't disrupt the habitat or maybe the fish that were there.
Got it.
So I think what Matt's saying is something I always believe with all kinds of bass fishing is, if there's an area that might have fighting fish in it, you want your lure to be the first thing to hit that zone, not your boat, not your wake, not anything. The lure should be the first thing there.
Yeah. It's very, very methodical when I do that, because that's exactly what he was saying. Because I find that the calico bass are more sensitive to vibration. Like he was saying, he's fishing when you're fishing deep structure. Those sand bass are down in the mud. You're fishing 80, 90 feet of water. They don't know you're there. The calico bass, especially this time of year, they're feeding on the top. They're the ones. I had a calico bass die, unfortunately, in this last tournament, and I cut it open because I made some fish tacos out of it, and it had all of those red kelp crabs on it, mm-hmm. And it also had an octopus. So, yeah. That's my approach.
Give us any one of you guys, just for someone who's just getting into the game, trying to figure it out, give us a rundown of uphill versus downhill current and how you determine that and how you're seeing that, just from someone who's just getting into the game.
Downhill runs to Cabo, uphill runs to Alaska.
You broke up, Decker.
I go a little bit further than that. So basically, anytime you're fishing kelp, wherever it is, you want current that's running parallel to land. And because bass will go to the upcurrent edge of things, and if there's a kelp bed, imagine there's a kelp bed running this direction. If there's current going this way, there could be biting bass all along that kelp bed on the outside edge. If it's going in towards the beach, you're going to have a very small section of biting bass on the leading edge of that kelp. If it's going away from shore, the bass that would be on the leading edge would be sitting on the beach, so you're not going to catch anything there at all. So ideally, is current going parallel to the shoreline. Some spots bite better going up, some spots bite better going down. Sure, that's the end of that.
Yeah, and the only thing that like screws that up is if you have wind, and it doesn't screw it up bad. It screws it up good, because you start getting that. I've always found that once you start to get that ripple on the water, bass get a little bit more comfortable and a little bit more aggressive. Their eyesight's not as good. Yeah. So like when we're out at like San Clemente and that wind starts to put that ripple on the water, I get excited, especially when, in the afternoon, like northwest corner, it just goes off. It just goes ridiculous. Like my daughter could catch a fish.
I thought I was right home at that point, but yeah.
But
one of the things you talk about with that, with the wind, is it breaks up the silhouette on the surface, and bass become a lot less picky. It's really, the more calm it is, the better eyesight they have. If there's a wind ripple or whatever, that's why the bass fishing is usually better in the afternoon. But let's talk about fishing shallow, Jimmy.
Be very careful. Be very careful.
Here's that, buddy.
I hate shallow.
I'm kind of known for fishing tight. I mean, I get in like really tight on some spots. And I mean, I surfed my whole life as a teenager and into my, late 20s, early 30s, having an understanding on how bottom contour and waves stand up and back off and where they will break. I've taken Eric and Matt. I've taken a few people into some spots where they were just like, I would never in a million years come in here.
Jimmy, I got to chime in here. Let me chime in for a second. He takes us to Clemente, and we're fishing tight to the beach near Pyramid Cove, which is on the east end. And we have to drive like 400 yards out this way and go along this weird stretch of beach. And there's a 10-foot wave breaking here and waves breaking on the shoreline 20 feet away. And Jimmy is threading the needle into a spot where he can hold the boat and we can hook giant bass. But if we go 5 feet either way, we're on the rocks or we're getting flipped over by a giant wave. So, yeah, there you go.
It's very important to understand where you are in relationship to a lot of the reefs on the hard bottom. If you're in 20 feet of water, generally speaking, you're very safe. You're very safe. Once you get into that 8 feet, 12 feet under the back of the boat, you're in a little more of a risky area. You got to keep your head on the swivel. You got to know what's coming in behind you. And you always have to have an exit strategy. The most important thing of fishing shallow is never have the bow of your boat pointed towards the beach. Number one rule. You can never have the bow. You either have to be parallel or 45'd out. So you can hit high on the TM if you have to, or tell Eric or my wife Tracy or whoever's fishing behind me, hey, get on the wheel and give us a little bump. There's a couple waves coming in here. But you catch a lot of big fish in very, very shallow water. The biggest fish I've caught with a client on my boat was in 7 feet of water down off Corona Del Mar.
We got that big one with Matt, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, Decker, I catch big fish in 40 feet of water.
I know, but that's not as exciting. That's not.
So I'm going to talk about one of the mistakes that people make, and Jimmy and I made the mistake at Catalina earlier this year. Is you get too comfortable, you fish the zone 1,000 times. It's calm. There's a swell, but it's more like this and like this. Water coming in, water going out, and you're so fixated on the fishing that you're casting the stuff and you realize you're in a spot where you have no way out.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's like, trim the main motor up. We got to get on a troller. And it happened.
Boom.
Yeah. We actually touched bottom at Cat like 3 months ago. We were fine. It was minor, but could have been a lot worse. It's just a reminder that, hey,
shit happens.
You also got to check the tides because the thing is like San Clemente, like if you don't know what the tide's doing, because something might be breaking on low tide, or high tide, or not breaking at all on high tide, and then it goes low, and then all of a sudden it's bowling up, and you're in the shits.
Yeah. When we fished a tournament Saturday, we got into some tighter spots that we normally fish on a high tide, but the tide was really low. And the west swell was not affecting us, but there was a big south swell, but it was very spaced out. I mean, 10 minutes, no swell, and then suddenly we're in tight, and that hangs a nice bass, put it in the boat. I look at it, I'm like, holy shit, hold on. Like,
Yeah. I mean, again,
yeah.
3 waves. I mean, we probably had 2 feet of water under the outboard when we went over the first one. You know, so I mean, it's sketchy.
yeah.
No.
Yeah, I fished with Scotty Petel, who on Saturday, and Chris Kieran, and Scotty usually fishes with Mike, who's the other Ballast Point fish team. Those guys are known to fish really, really tight. And I was pretty amazed at where Scotty was putting us on some spots, and I was scared. I don't like to fish tight. I don't like to fish that. I like to relax, you know, like, So, but honestly, he knew. He's like, Moyer, we're in 40 feet of water right here, but where we're casting is 15.
Yeah.
He's like, you're fine.
Big shelf.
Yeah.
So let's go back, Jimmy. What conditions do you look for shallow like that?
No bass is worth dying for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Jimmy, what conditions do you look for when you fish shallow?
So all I want is surge and a little bit of whitewater. Surge and whitewater, like that spot where we go into Clemente. You know, you want to have. I like to fish it on a higher tide going out personally, but you just want to have a lot of water moving. Not so much that we had last weekend, where it was. I would call it basically unfishable.
Yeah.
But you want to have water moving, active bass. Stuff that has to swim to stay in the current, not something that's just sitting there behind a rock, you know, Nemoing. You want stuff that has to be swimming because it has some resistance. That's the stuff that's going to get triggered to eat because it's already burning energy to sit in the current there. So,
right. That's Todd Banser quoted that a long time ago. Because once the treadmill starts, which is the current, the bass get hungry. And that's wherever, you know, and what Jimmy's talking about, we fished a spot in Easton Clemente, and what was that, like 3 or 4 weeks ago? It was similar conditions, but a slightly higher tide. And every cast to the beach was a 5 to 8 pound bass. I mean, we lost so
we nailed them.
We would have been a tournament, we had like close to 40 pounds. I mean, it was like that kind of day. And we went back to the tournament day on Saturday, but the tide was like 2 feet lower. And we could not get the boat where it was. The water was super clear. We got no bites at all. So it shows you it's conditional. So no matter what you caught, whenever, it matters, what did the water look like? What was the bait situation? What was the current situation, surge situation? Put those pieces together. It takes a long time. It's not like you're going to have tomorrow and catch bass somewhere and figure it out and be like, oh, I got it forever. No, you have to go there 10 times, see when it bites, and move forward from there.
Yep.
Well, you know, Jerry taught me when we fished the COC one time was he was always telling me that he's like, if there's kelp growing there, most likely 99% of the time a wave's not breaking there. But the problem is,
I'm sorry, Matt. That's a great.
Go ahead, Decker.
If you're in kelp or next to kelp, you're pretty much 90% safe. Because anywhere where the waves are breaking, the kelp gets washed out.
Yeah.
So if you're in 18 feet and you have kelp next to the side of the boat and you're casting into a big boiler on the inside 15 feet away, it's pretty good bet that you're safe there if you're sitting next to kelp. That's an excellent point. Yeah, excellent.
So I want to shift gears one more time, just for the sake of time here to get through, is I want to talk about kind of like the bite, right? Like, so we're throwing these crankbaits, we're throwing them into the areas of the current, the movement, the zones that you guys like. You got the cadence dialed in. Give us kind of that run through of, again, like the bite of each one and what you're looking for and how you're triggering it. And if you get short bit on something, are you letting it pause? Just kind of run us through your program on catching saltwater bass.
I don't know how to catch
You want me to go first?
Yeah.
Always.
Well, first of all, when I'm fishing calicos, you got to have good sunglasses. So you got to have Costas, right? That's all I wear, the 580G Costas. And when I'm fishing, I'm actually looking behind the lure. because I'm looking for that reaction bite, and I'm seeing followers, and a lot of times like I'm always searching for big fish. So like I'll see, like if I'm fishing a weedless and I see smaller fish coming up, I'm not reeling down on them. And I know a lot of people when they're fishing weedless, they get that bite and they're swinging, and that's not what you do with the weedless. You get that weedless bite, you're reeling, and you get that bite, it loads up, then you're setting the hook.
So you're kind of.
I also fish. I wind into them, and I do the same thing even with a crankbait or anything else. I want to make sure that they're there, but I also like when I'm fishing the I've been taught with the weedless. I'm not swinging on the first fish, because the little fish, the little calicos always eat first. So I'm looking behind there. I'm looking for that giant. So what you get is you get the little guy come up and they're kind of toying with it, and then you're like, nope, not that one, and it sounds funny, but then the big one, you're, oh, that's the one right there. And Eric and Jimmy will probably tell you the same thing.
Well, I will say that when I'm fishing a weedless swim bait, this is something I take from Matt Koch's school. I wish he was here tonight, but he had to work. But we're watching our bait. We're making short casts. We're looking at our bait. From the moment my bait hits the water until it gets back to the rod tip, I see it. So I can see what's biting it. And you can decide that fish doesn't have it. It's got it by the back. This is when it's good. Like come up and hit it. Sometimes you get one bite every half hour. It's like, oh, fuck, I got a bite. But it's like, yeah, that fish doesn't have it. This fish has it. And then you can say, hey, I'm going to pause, let it eat the bait, turn away from you. I'm going to set the hook on it and get that fucking fish. Just like I'm talking about the lead head. It eats it head first. You set the hook, it pulls the bait out backwards. There's no hook presented to that bait or to that fish. So you just need to
or like when they T-bone it.
Yeah,
you see it come out from the
yeah, we got nothing here. Yeah. So that's basically what it comes down to with all that. You have to kind of watch it and decide.
So you guys are watching, like you said, you're watching it from the second it hits the water, watching that lure, watching the flower.
If I got two treble hooks hanging out the back, it's a different story. But it's
I've gotten a lot of nice fish figure. I've gotten a lot of nice fish figure eighting it under the trolling motor.
Oh yeah, same.
So are those fish you basically give us a run through of that, right? You're basically pulling them out of their home, out of their zone. They're following it, and then for whatever reason they don't take. So you've got little tricks to get them to bite. Run us through that real quick.
It's not so much that they don't take it, but you run out of water.
Mm-hmm.
You got to watch your bait till it comes out of the water. Number one rule, because a lot of the fish are going to hit you right when you think you're done, and you go to flip your jig out of the water. So if you're winding it back to the boat and you've got a solid 5 or 6 pounder there and you run out of water, you got to stick your rod in and do the walleye or the muskie thing. And a lot of times, man, that's all it takes.
That legit works. I watch Jimmy swimming 5, 6 pounders like that all the time. I think he's looking yellow like that too. Yeah.
A week ago at Clemente, me and Eric were fishing that area that he said, and I cast out on the opposite side over some isolated kelp stringers, and I'm winding it in, and I watched this thing come up, and it was right behind it. I ran out of room. I had like 2 feet of line. I stuck my 10-footer down and did this, and we're like, oh, wait till you see this one.
Try
it. Yeah. The key to bass fishing is paying attention.
Any fishing.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I always say it's like when you first get out on the water, it seems like you get bit right away, and then if it gets slow, you kind of normal person would probably lose patience or focus, I'm in it to win it. Like every single cast, I'm gonna get bit. And if you don't have that mindset, you're not gonna get bit. If you're not, like what Eric was saying, if you're not changing it up, trying something different, there's always a place on the coast. There's always a place at the island that's biting. You got to just find it, and you got to find out what they're doing, what they're eating. But they're always eating somewhere. you know.
So I want to add something real quick here. So Matt's talking about these retrieves and different things you could use with different baits. So basically, every one of us has caught bass in different situations on different retrieves. And those of us who can remember what those are have the benefit of being able to access that again. So I know it's been a long time since there's been a Rolodex. There used to be this thing where you'd have all these cards with A, B, C, all the way to Z, and you can flip through them and see someone's phone number you can pick up. So I pull up to a spot and I think that, hey, the letter B is going to have the right retrieve for this based on what I see. It doesn't. So I go to C, I go to D, I go to E, I go to F, and I try all these different things. And I'm like, oh my God, they're biting M.
Yeah.
And I just repeat M and I continue to catch them. And I mean, that's really what it comes down to. But, for guys to be successful, they need to accumulate that thing. So if you go out and you have the same bait, you do the same goddamn thing, you're not catching fish on it, stop it. Try something different.
Yep.
Watch how low the water. Hey, that looks different than I was doing. Let me try that. Oh, I got a bite. Okay, there's one more Rolodex card you just put in. Let's move on to the next one. So it takes years, but it's not impossible. I'm not a great fisherman, honestly. I'm very stuck in my ways. I do a lot of fucked up shit, but overall, I do pretty good because I learn from my mistakes. I think we can all say the same thing.
So this is the perfect transition into my
Hold on. I got one thing to say about guys that are just getting into it that just came into my head. When you're starting off artificial lure fishing, whether it be weedless swim bait or rip bait or stick bait or anything like that, and you're a private boater guy and you're used to fishing live bait, go ahead and go to the bait receiver and get a swing of anchovy if they got it, or some sardine, and don't put a hook in it. Use that to chum, get the fish coming around the boat active, and then start catching them on your artificial lures. And that'll give you the confidence to start fishing that other bait, that you don't have to put a live bait in. And then you don't, after one or two trips and you start figuring out how to fish your artificial lures, then you don't have to waste the $50 at the bait receiver anymore.
That's a great point, buddy.
So that's what you read my mind there, Decker, because I was literally just about to say, hey, to wrap this up, I want to ask everybody, if you're new, just getting into the game, what's your one piece of advice? So we got Decker's. I want to hear Matt and Eric's next.
Go ahead, Eric.
You said you did it first. I'll go ahead. So my one piece of advice is go out there, find a lure, fish it until you catch something on it, figure it out 100%, and then move on to the next lure. I've been fishing bass for a very long time compared to a lot of guys, and I am still figuring out new lures. And once I get one down and I've got it mastered, I move on to the next one. Or a presentation. I learned how to fish sand bass. I wasn't happy how I fished calico bass in the kelp. So I went to the toughest possible place I could find, which is Palos Birdies. I spent 5 years not catching shit, and then finally figured out how to catch them. And then you can translate that to the next thing. Now I'm throwing, me and Jimmy are fishing slow pitch jigs and shit. I mean, it's just, we're getting completely out of our comfort zone. Find one, figure it out, move on to the next one, move on to the next one. You'll become a much more well-rounded angler. And I want to say one thing in closing is that it doesn't matter if it's bluefin, we were talking about that earlier, or yellowfin or marlin or sand bass or spotted bay bass. They're fucking fish. Their brain's this big or like that big. And if you can figure out what they're doing and how to target them, you can kill them for the rest of your life. So just put in a little bit of effort.
Yep. A fish is a fish is a fish. Doesn't matter where it's at, doesn't matter where it swims. They're just a fish. So yeah, there's definitely some gold nuggets there. And let's wrap it up. All right, Matt, what do you got for us? The one piece.
I gotta say it's time on the water. The thing is any way you can get on the water. I've been a student of bass fishing because I love it. But I've done the kayak thing. I've done the float tube thing. I've done. I bought a little aluminum boat, and finally I've gotten to the point where I have a boat that it's my dream boat. But time on the water, and just like they were saying is I want to be a well-rounded fisherman. So, and I wanted to get better, and I wanted to keep progressing. So like everything I've ever done in life is I wanted to progress. And how do you progress is that you learn. So, I tuned into seminars like this. I got enough guts to go fish the SWBA when I knew I was going to get my brains kicked in. But you know what? Like I'd go there and I would pick their brains. They would tell, fishermen are liars, but for the most part, you can kind of walk around the parking lot afterwards and kind of see what people are fishing. And it was crazy, you start picking these guys' brains. And I remember the very first tournament I ever fished was a spotted bay bass tournament in San Diego Bay. And I thought of myself as a pretty good spotted bay bass fisherman. And I think we ended up tying Decker and Tracy, but we had a bigger fish. So we ended up inching them out, I think, for like 8th place or something. But I remember Decker came up to me and I was like in awe because, I read the articles that he wrote and everything that I did. And I think that's the thing with people. If they want to get better at something, you got to read, you got to pay attention, you got to take notes, and you got to have a good memory.
Yeah. And again, and I think you got to do it, right? You got to get out there, you got to get on the water, you got to be intentional, take the notes. I mean, nowadays too, like with cell phones, right? Mm-hmm. Take a picture of your surroundings and go, oh, look at what the water was doing at this time of day on this. Like you can get a lot of information if you're just intentional about some things that you're doing out there. So I think that all this is
and one more thing too is don't be afraid to come up and talk to us. Like if you see me somewhere, you see me on the water. I mean, honestly, like I'm one of those guys, like I'll throw people, a beer, I'll throw them some lures. This is what I'm catching them on. Like I'm not a pretentious asshole that's going to be like, oh dude, go away, I'm busy. No, I mean, I love the sport of fishing. It's not my job. And I want to share and help anybody that wants to learn.
Come see the mayor of Newport Dunes.
That's Dagger. Yep. It's totally cool. We're all approachable. I might look like a dick, but I'm not. It's, hey, I'm having to talk to you. So
that's awesome. And that's exactly why we want to do these. And I know there's probably a handful of questions that we didn't get to, but again, guys, like for everyone out there trying to get into the game, or if you've been in the game and you just want to step it up, like, yeah, I mean, truly, I've had some interactions with all these dudes and they are super approachable and a wealth of knowledge. And again, I'm no good at the bass game. So don't come to me unless you want wrong advice that you could start there, but no, seriously. I want to wrap up here. And again, thank you guys so much for your time. Really appreciate sharing everything and appreciate, again, kind of the open invite to everyone of like reach out to them and get their download and just kind of get on the water. That's what this whole thing's about. So guys, I really, really appreciate it. For everyone that tuned in, thank you so much. Thank you to Costa for the questions that we missed. We'll run back through those and get back to those. So apologize. We kind of get into our flow here and it's hard to get all of them. So guys, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us on, buddy.
Thanks for having us.
All right. And that's it for this one. So again, thanks guys. Have a good night.